Hello, everybody. Wanted to start a new podcast series on something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's scientific breakthroughs. Since I was trained as a scientist and have my degrees in science, um, I do follow scientific discovery pretty carefully. Every day I read a number of journal articles about new discoveries in science, and I have to say the last 5, 10 years have been some of the most exciting years in biomedical science, the science of biology as it relates to diseases and diagnostics and treatments. This has been a really exciting time. And just sort of to give you the upshot right in front, um, I think we're very, very close to major breakthroughs in treatment for really serious diseases like cancer and neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I think we're very, very close to effective treatments for all of those things. And when I say very, very close, I mean probably really good approved treatments within the next 3 to 5 years. Um, and that's due to a massive leap in our understanding about the underlying process of disease development. It's hard to treat a disease without really understanding what causes that disease, how it develops in the body. And honestly, up until recently, we didn't have a real good idea about what causes a lot of these diseases, about what is really going wrong that leads you to get degenerative disease, let's say like Alzheimer's, um, or all the steps involved with cancer development, for example. But recently, thanks to some truly amazing research done by scientists all over the world, in fact, the leading scientific researchers in some of these fields now are outside of the United States. That's a new thing. A lot of them are in Asia, Japan, China. A lot of good research done in India and Israel. um, so, this kind of biomedical science has really gone global. We still probably in the United States here have a little bit of a lead in this field of research, but not much of one, as other countries have devoted a lot more resources than we have into this and have really caught up with the science here. But ultimately, science is a cooperative venture. When scientists make an important discovery, they publish it in journals that are read by other scientists all over the world. And scientists in labs in different parts of the world often cooperate with each other and build on each other's work. So although science can be competitive, it's also cooperative. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter where the important discoveries are made. What matters is that they're made and that our understanding of diseases, how they develop, how to diagnose them, how to treat them, moves forward regardless of who it is moving it. Because treatments and diagnostics developed in one part of the world are going to be used in other parts of the world. So one really exciting thing that's happened in the last few years is major advances in things like cancer diagnostics and treatments, and in our understanding of how diseases develop that are really very impactful, diseases such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, brain diseases. Honestly, it's taken us a long time to understand disease like Alzheimer's, in that how it develops, what really goes wrong, and why does it go wrong. And that's really impacted and slowed down our ability to find good treatments for that disease. a very high percentage of people in the United States, for example, over the age of 80, have some form of dementia. May not be Alzheimer's. There's other forms like frontotemporal dementia, which Bruce Willis has, or Lewy body dementia, which Robin Williams has or had. But Alzheimer's is by far the most common type of dementia in older folks. And the science, our understanding of Alzheimer's and our ability to find effective treatments for it have been hampered by the fact that scientists in that field kind of got stuck on a bad hypothesis. That is, they discovered a correlation between things and they mistook a cause for an effect. This actually happens fairly frequently in biomedicine, but in Alzheimer's medicine, it's really slowed down the development of effective treatments. Many decades ago, they discovered when they autopsied the brains of people who had Alzheimer's when they died, they discovered that people who, if you look at the brain of somebody with advanced Alzheimer's, you see all of these tangles of proteins, which are like threads in the brain. And the neurons in the areas that are affected by Alzheimer's, like the memory centers of the brain, they were covered in these tangles of proteins. We later discovered the proteins are a type of protein called amyloid. And so there's these tangles of amyloid proteins which are outside of the nerve cells in the areas that are affected. And in the inside of the nerve cells of the areas that are affected in Alzheimer's, there's a tangle of a different kind of protein called tau protein. So it was, since we kept seeing this correlation when we autopsied the brains of people with Alzheimer's, a lot of biological scientists and medical researchers, they assumed that it was those protein tangles, those threads inside and outside the nerve cells in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. They assumed that it was the development of those threads that were actually damaging the cells and killing the cells and causing the symptoms. So they assumed that those amyloid tangle proteins and those tau tangle proteins were a cause of Alzheimer's. So they tried to develop treatments that focused on eliminating those tangles of proteins, assuming that eliminating those tangles of proteins in the brain would preserve the nerve functions, prevent the nerves from dying in those areas, and so stop the disease or stop it from getting worse. But recently, over the last 5 years, we, when I say we, I mean medical researchers. Medical researchers did discover treatments that could eliminate those protein tangles from the brain, particularly eliminate the amyloid tangles that are outside of the nerve cells and seem to be like strangling the nerve cells when you look under the microscope. And so we developed treatments, we developed chemicals that could actually eliminate those tangles from the living brain. But the problem was when we started giving those treatments to people with Alzheimer's, they didn't get better. And not only did they not get better, but it didn't really completely stop the progression of the disease. The disease kept progressing, although usually a little bit slower. So those treatments, even though we could tell with scans, we could use scans to show that those tangles were gone, it didn't seem to help very much. And it was that discovery, that research, that led biologists to realize that those tangles that they were seeing in people with Alzheimer's weren't the cause of Alzheimer's. They were actually the effect of Alzheimer's. So when we gave people treatments to eliminate those tangled proteins in the brain, we weren't really helping because the tangles weren't causing the symptoms of Alzheimer's. They were just there as an effect of something else. There was something else that was causing the Alzheimer's, and that something else was also causing those tangles of proteins to appear. It turns out that those tangles of amyloid proteins actually occur anywhere in the brain that's damaged. When we started doing autopsies on other folks who have different kinds of brain damage, we also saw those tangles in areas that were damaged. So the only thing the tangles tell us, those amyloid protein tangles, was that this is an area of damage. And the way the brain responds to damage is it tries to limit the extent of the damage by walling off the area. And it uses those amyloid proteins to kind of isolate and wall off the area. So that's actually a normal brain response to damage, those proteins. They're not the cause of Alzheimer's. They're the result of the damage that happens during Alzheimer's. They're the way the brain is trying to protect itself. Now, in the case of Alzheimer's, those protein tangles don't actually protect the brain from the damage. The damage is really happening more inside the cells than outside, and so the amyloid protein tangles aren't helping. But they're not the cause of Alzheimer's. So we spent 20 years, focusing treatments for Alzheimer's on something that wasn't the cause. And that really slowed down. The researchers in this field were so convinced that those protein tangles were the cause of Alzheimer's that they didn't stop to consider that they might have just been an effect, not a cause. In science, determining causality between things that are related is really, really important. Being able to tell the difference between something that causes something else and something that's an effect of something else is very, very important in biomedicine. And in the case of Alzheimer's research, for decades they got that wrong. They saw something that was correlated, they assumed it was a cause, and it was actually an effect. So what is the cause of Alzheimer's? Have we actually determined that? And the answer is yeah, we have now. Once we freed scientists from that incorrect notion, once they realized that they were wrong about those tangles of proteins causing Alzheimer's, they suddenly started looking intensively for other things. And that were correlated and were causal. And what they found is that it was inflammation, chronic inflammation in this important region of the brain that stores memories, or actually creates memories, that it was inflammation in that area that was actually the cause. And those protein tangles were just the brain's natural response to that inflammation. But it was the inflammation that was the cause. So once they realized that, then that opened up a whole new way of looking at the disease and many new ways of treating it. For example, if you know that chronic inflammation in an area is causing a real serious damage to that area, then you can work on what's called anti-inflammatories. You can work on finding medicines that can reduce the inflammation in that area. Now, most of you are probably familiar with anti-inflammatories and with inflammation, but if you're not, I'm going to do a little primer here on inflammation, because it turns out that not just Alzheimer's, but also other brain diseases like Parkinson's disease, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and also cancers are often caused by chronic inflammation in certain regions of the body, either the brain, or in the case of those brain diseases, or in the case of cancer, other parts of the body and other organs. So to understand what's going on here, you need to understand what inflammation is. I'm using this word a lot. The word itself is really kind of fun and cool. Inflammation, where does that word come from? Well, inflame. It means in fire. Because where you have inflammation, particularly when it's superficial near the skin, what you have is you have swelling and you have redness and you have heat and pain. Those are like the hallmarks of inflammation. If you feel an inflamed area with your fingers, you feel that it's warm, warmer than the skin around it. If you look at it, it's swollen, it's painful, often sensitive to touch. But because of that heat that you can feel when you touch it and the redness, the coloration of it, the redness of it, they called it inflammation, inflame, in fire. It's like it's burning, it's on fire, that area. Now, in reality, it's not actually burning. Inflamed areas aren't really on fire. And we'll talk about what causes the redness and the swelling. So inflammation, what they call acute inflammation, acute, A-C-U-T-E. That's one word, not two, not acute. So acute inflammation, when in medical jargon, when they say acute, what they mean is rapid and short term. So something that happens quickly and usually doesn't go on for very long. Now, sometimes it doesn't go on for very long because it kills the person. For example, when you have an acute heart attack, it comes on suddenly, it's serious, and you may die. You know, if you die, that usually happens quick, and you know, so that would be acute. But acute is what they call what they call short term. So it comes on quick, comes on hard, but it's short term, either because your body deals with it quickly and fixes it quickly, or because it kills you quickly. So acute inflammation is your body's natural response. It's a protective response. It's your body's natural response to an injury or an area of your body that's been infected, invaded by germs. So when you get injured or when you get invaded by germs, the natural body response to that injury or invasion is inflammation. And inflammation is actually designed to help your body defend that area, to fight off the germs, and to break down and then repair the damaged tissue in that area. So you can break up inflammation, normal acute inflammation, into 4 phases. There's really 4 parts to it, and those are kind of illustrated here. So first part is what's called detection. In order to respond to a damage or an invasion, your body has to actually know that it's been damaged or invaded. And there's so the first part of inflammation is actually the local tissue. It's done by the local tissue that's been infected or damaged, releasing chemicals. So when cells and tissues here are damaged or infected, they release chemicals, which are essentially alarm chemicals that they go into your blood, and they let some cells in your blood know that there's something bad going on here. And so these chemicals that are released from this damaged and infected area, this is showing the skin that's been punctured and some bacteria have gotten in through the puncture wound. And so this is an invaded and damaged area of skin here. And that this tissue here, particularly the lower tissues, lower skin connective tissue, releases chemicals in response to this invasion and damage. And those chemicals alert what are called white blood cells, which are in the bloodstream. So nearby blood vessels pick up those chemicals, and the white cells that are in those blood vessels nearby, they get those signals that, well, there's an alarm. This is the alarm going off. There's something bad going on here. So what happens in response to these chemicals is that the walls of the blood vessels loosen up. Normally, these walls are very tight, and they keep the blood and blood cells inside the blood vessel and separate it from the outside here. But in response to these alarm chemicals, these blood vessels, their walls kind of loosen up. And also, the blood vessel gets wider so that more blood can come in here. We're trying to get more blood into these blood vessels which will bring more blood cells, including these protective cells and clotting cells. And then these looser walls of the capillary allow some of that blood to leak out into the tissue here. And that's what causes the swelling. When you see swelling in redness in an area, that swelling and redness is due to extra blood and extra blood fluid coming into that area. Extra blood in the local blood vessels causes it to look redder because there's more blood near the surface. And that's got a reddish color to it. And then that swelling is due to blood fluid leaking out from the blood vessels and into that area. And so you get swelling and you get redness here. And again, that's just due to these alarm chemical signals that are sent out by the damaged cells in this area. And so they attract, once these blood vessels get all loose, the cells that are normally in the blood can come out. So platelets, they come out of the blood, and they're cells in your blood that cause you to clot. So they form like a mesh that stops the bleeding here and starts to seal the wound temporarily. And then other white cells can come out through those loosened capillaries and the loosened blood vessels. The walls are now loose enough where these cells can slip out into the tissue. So you get white blood cells, which are defensive and protective, coming out into the tissue, and platelets coming out of the tissue. The platelets seal the wound with a clot so that no more blood comes out, no more bacteria gets in. And these white cells come in to attack the bacteria and to also gobble up the damaged cells so that there can be healing and repair. And you can create new cells. And then finally, at the end, after the bacteria has all been destroyed by the white cells and gobbled up, and the old cell debris, the damaged cells with the debris, have also been gobbled up by these white cells, then healing can begin. You can start repairing the wound. That is building new skin tissue to cover up that wound. So this is the normal process of inflammation. It's a 4-stage process. Local chemicals, where the damage is, cause the local blood vessels to receive more blood and also send some of that fluid out and those cells out through loosened capillary walls into that area, and that causes swelling and redness. So the swelling and redness is a good thing, normally. That means that your body's detected that there's something wrong there and is going to send in stuff, the troops, the blood cells, to try to repair it. So once you've got the swelling and redness, the loosened capillaries, then the platelets come out to seal the wound, and the white cells come out to take care of the bacteria and clear away the damaged cell debris. And that's what's going on here. And then once all that stuff is cleared out, then your body can actually, the swelling at that point goes down, these blood vessels close up again, they get sealed up, and the swelling goes down, and then you can really start repairing this area, can rebuild new tissue to repair the wound. And so that's the normal process of inflammation. And again, this is a natural protective mechanism of your body. Wherever there's damage, wherever there's infection, you're going to get this inflammatory response. Now, as I said, normally the response is this response is answering a wound, physical damage to the area, or an infection where the area is damaged because germs from the outside of your body have invaded and come in and are destroying your body's tissues. For example, bacteria, they eat your tissues, right? So they secrete chemicals that kill cells and poison them and kill them, and then they eat the debris. And if viruses come in, they get inside the cells and they reproduce inside the cells until the cells just burst open. But in either case, you've got a lot of cell damage, and you need to take care of these germs before they can actually get into the blood vessels and start circulating around your body and destroying other parts of your body. You want to try to keep them limited as to where they go. And the easiest way to do that is to keep them from getting into your bloodstream. So the fact that fluid is coming out of your blood here actually makes it harder for these bugs to get into your blood because they're swimming against the tide, essentially. So again, that swelling is protective. It means that fluid's coming out of your blood, which makes it harder for germs to get into your blood, but easier for the blood cells, like the white cells, to get out of your blood and into the tissues to attack the germs and clean up the debris. Okay, so that's normal inflammation, and this is a good thing. This is the normal way your body defends and repairs itself. Now, if it's going normally, it's acute. It comes on quickly, and after a few days, it starts to go away as your body starts to heal and repair. The problems that when we are talking about diseases of the brain or cancers, we're talking about the cause being inflammation, but not normal inflammation, not acute inflammation. The cause of things like cancer and a lot of heart disease and brain diseases is actually what's called chronic inflammation. So chronic means long-term, means ongoing. And when you have chronic inflammation, it means that the injury is never quite resolved. It never really gets fully repaired. And the area just keeps getting re-injured. So when that happens, when your body can't actually repair the injury because what's causing the injury is something that your body can't get rid of, then you get chronic inflammation, which is where the same area just gets injured again and again and again and again, and this process never completes. Chronic inflammation causes very bad things to happen to your tissues. It causes, essentially a permanent wound, which can be external or internal. And it leads to permanent damage or malfunction of the local cells and tissues. So what the difference with chronic inflammation is, you start out the same. There's damage, there's alarm signals, there's swelling and redness as the capillaries and blood vessels get wider and then open up to let out cells. There's defensive cells and platelets coming into the area to try to fight off the bug. But in this case, what's causing the damage is something that they can't fight. They're not going to successfully get rid of it. And so what happens then is these vessels stay open and more white cells come in, and different types of white cells start coming in. If inflammation goes on longer than a week or two, you get much more potent white cells coming into this inflamed area. The first line of troops that comes in, the first line of white cells, are good at destroying small amounts of bacteria and absorbing some small amounts of damaged cells. But if that's not enough, you start recruiting more serious white cells to this area, many more of them, and the white cells are angrier, nastier, and they produce very toxic chemicals designed to kill a wider range of bugs. But unfortunately, those additional toxic chemicals also damage healthy tissue in the area. So with the chronic inflammation, more and more white cells come in, and these are more potent. They have stronger poisons that they use to stop invaders, and they tend to damage healthy tissue in the area as well as unhealthy tissue. And although they try to clear away the debris, what's causing the damage here is not something that they can actually get rid of. And so you keep going through this process of starting to heal the wound, but instead of the wound getting fully healed, and you're getting this nice clean healing here, instead of this nice clean healing, what you get is you get the wound continuously reopening and starting to close, and reopening and starting to close. And eventually that causes pretty severe damage and malfunction of the healthy tissue that's in that vicinity. And so this tissue is no longer working properly. It's no longer maintaining its cohesive structure, and it's not working right anymore. And that process can eventually lead to cancer if it occurs in any organ in the body, or if it occurs specifically in certain brain regions, it can lead to Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. Again, it just depends on where this is occurring. But the underlying process is inflammation. If the inflammation actually happens within a blood vessel, like inside a blood vessel, that leads to what's called atherosclerosis, which is the main cause of heart attack and stroke. So it turns out one of the major discoveries of the last 10 years in biomedicine is inflammation, chronic inflammation, inflammation that doesn't resolve, is actually a major contributing factor in many, many different diseases, particularly age-related diseases like cancer, heart disease, brain disease. So a question then becomes, what causes chronic inflammation? What makes inflammation chronic instead of acute? And the simple answer is chronic inflammation is inflammation, damage that's caused by something that your body can't heal, can't fix, can't get rid of. Like if you just have a small number of bacteria here and a small number of damaged cells, the normal inflammation response is plenty strong enough to get rid of those bacteria, get rid of the damaged cells so that repair can occur. But that presumes that what caused the damage is not a permanent thing. It's short-lived and repairable. So in this case, for example, what caused the damage was a puncture. Some sharp object punctured the skin. And presumably you pulled out the sharp object or it fell out on its own, and then you can just, clean up and repair the skin around that opening. So here we have something that punctured the skin, but then that goes away, and now the skin can just be repaired after the area is cleaned up. But what if what caused the damage is not something that goes away? So, for example, there's times when you get injured by something like, say a piece of metal or something, but it gets lodged in the skin and it doesn't come out on its own. So maybe a piece of metal gets actually pushed underneath the skin and gets buried there and doesn't dislodge. Well, that's going to cause chronic inflammation because your white cells can't actually dissolve metal. They can't get rid of the piece of metal. So, in that case, white cells are going to keep coming in trying to get rid of that metal, but can't get rid of that metal. And so the metal stays in and you get a chronic inflammation response. Now, eventually what your body can do with something like a piece of metal is it walls it off. The white cells eventually, they kind of give up, but they let the skin just form what's called the scar tissue, strong fibers of connective tissue, and just surround the piece of metal with it to try to just wall it off and separate it from the rest of the body so it doesn't go anywhere. But there's other things that can cause chronic inflammation. For example, something called autoimmune disease. And autoimmune disease is where the cells that normally protect you, the white cells, actually attack you. White cells are normally designed to defend you against germs. They attack germs and they clean up dead or damaged cells. But some people develop conditions where some of their white cells don't do that. Some of their white cells actually are the things that are attacking the healthy tissue. And so when you get some white cells that aren't behaving properly, a good analogy for this is if you develop an army to defend your nation, but the members of the army decide to, instead of defending the nation, they decide to attack the citizens of that nation. So the army that you develop to defend you actually ends up attacking you or attacking your people. That is autoimmune disease. And in that case, your body actually can't usually get rid of what's causing the damage, because what's causing the damage are cells of your own body, these white cells. And white cells aren't supposed to kill other white cells. So when it's white cells that are causing the damage, that tends to last. Those cells just linger and reproduce, and they can't be gotten rid of by other white cells. And so the damage just occurs again and again and again and on, and you can never get to a fully repaired state because these cells just keep reproducing, making more cells that cause that same damage to that same area. So that's autoimmune disease. And it turns out that autoimmune inflammation is chronic inflammation and can lead to terrible dysfunction, even the failure of certain organs of the body. Because these areas that are being attacked just keep getting damaged over and over again. You can never get rid of what's damaging them. And so you never end up in a fully healed state. And eventually the healthy tissue around those areas of damage just starts breaking down. And that leads to more damage. So that's chronic inflammation. A lot of chronic inflammation is due to autoimmune conditions, to white cells that are supposed to defend you attacking your body instead. There can be other causes of chronic inflammation too, but they're much less common. By far the most common cause here is essentially some kind of autoimmune condition. Turns out that autoimmune conditions are not nearly as uncommon as we thought. There are a lot of very common autoimmune conditions, which until recently we didn't recognize as autoimmune. For example, when people get a lot of buildup of fat in their blood vessels, that occurs where the blood vessels are chronically inflamed and damaged. And so a lot of people they develop chronic inflammation of blood vessels, which is essentially an autoimmune process. So just recognizing that it's chronic inflammation in various parts of the body that cause a lot of these really serious age-related diseases that are responsible ultimately for most human death. And that discovery led to the idea that, well, what if we could stop that chronic inflammation, right? And when I say stop, I don't mean treat, I mean stop, I mean turn off. What if we could find either treatments or chemicals or whatever that would, for example, stop the autoimmune attack or prevent it from happening in the first place? That would give the area a chance to heal. And then you could turn the chronic inflammation and just back into acute inflammation and give the area a chance to heal. So a lot of treatments now that they're developing are really designed to deal with the chronic inflammatory process that led to this problem in the first place. And for example, we used the Alzheimer's story earlier, where we mistook an effect for a cause. We mistook those amyloid protein tangles in the brain of people with Alzheimer's as a cause of the Alzheimer's rather than effect. Those tangles, those amyloid tangles, are essentially like scar tissue. They're the way that the brain is trying to protect itself from that damage spreading. But they're not the cause of the damage. The cause was chronic inflammation in that area. And that begs the question of how does chronic inflammation begin in like an area of the brain? And so we're going to be talking about that and about exciting new treatments for various serious diseases that are based more on this theory, on the inflammatory theory of illness. And by the way, chronic inflammation is also apparently due to a lot of the effects of aging. It's responsible for a lot of the effects of aging that we see. So in the next video, we're going to talk about some specific examples of the way chronic inflammation in different areas causes serious problems in those areas, and new treatments that are designed to deal with that, with the real cause of some of these problems. Okay, so thanks for sticking with me this far, and hope you watch the next inflammatory video.